I've always believed this house to be the spiritual epicenter of the Cash family. All of God's blessings seem to follow Carrie Cash's prayers from Dyess, Arkansas to the front door of this place. Ray and Carrie Cash were God's people. This house was their final home on this earth. Unimaginable success, trials, suffering, heartache, life, and ultimately death, followed by the promise of heaven, found its mark right here in the lives of so many generations of Cash people. Every family has an ultimate praying ground, and I've always considered this place to be the Cash family's.
Well, this was my great-grandmother's kitchen, MamaCash's kitchen, if this place could talk. Some of the best memories and good times were here. I mean, this house right here, that I don't care who owns it or who calls it theirs, it's hers. It'll always be hers. And I'm not leaving out my great-grandpa, Ray. I loved him dearly too, but it's just synonymous with her, you know. He would sit outside every day, put the flag up first thing in the morning, sit outside and watch people go by up and down this hill looking over at my grandpa's house. And actually, they still come by today. The house across the street, my grandfather's house, isn't even there anymore. It burnt down. I sat there and watched it burn down. It's terrible, but still, people come by this house every day, all day long.
Some of my favorite memories are in this house, and no telling who would drop by to get advice from Grandma, you know. You'd walk in, there'd be Larry Gatlin sitting there talking to Grandma, you know, getting advice, or one of the Oakridge boys, you know.
We would just sit and talk for hours, and she would pray with me, and she would play the piano. She would ask me what I was doing with my life. I
walked in one day, for instance, into the kitchen here, and Robert Duvall was sitting at the counter, eating a piece of pie and drinking a glass of her tea. And I introduced myself, and he said, "Hey, good to see you, how are you?" And they talked a few more minutes, and he said, "May I use the restroom?" She said, "Yeah, let's go right on back and down the hall." He got up and left the room, and she said, "Who is that?" I said, "Grandma, that's Robert Duvall." She said, "What's he do?" I said, "Grandma, he's one of the most famous actors in the world." She said, "Tell him to put his plate in the sink." Grandma.
And I remember driving to this very house I'm sitting in today, my mom and dad's home. And I drove in the driveway here, and I felt a peace come over me. My greatest memory of this house is sitting around the table in the kitchen, telling our stories of being on the road, Johnny, my brother Tommy, and myself.
As the stories came to us through Tommy and Joanne, you know, all the individual Cash family members, they always talked about not just Mama's house, they talked about Mama's kitchen, you know. I mean, this is where everything happened. Most of the pictures, almost all the pictures you see of Johnny in this house were taken here in this room. Not out in the living room, not on the back porch, no, taken right here. And this room is the beating heart of that family, you know, and it was for so many years. In the process of our restoration work, we found out what this room meant to the Cash family. Every layer that came off, I had to take multiple layers off and unmask it. And this wood here is what's called Pecky cypress, and you can only get this wood from sinker logs down in the Mississippi right at New Orleans, where they floated them downstream and they would hold them until they could be shipped out. Well, these were great cypress trees that were used for shutters and all manner of material back in the 1800s. But if they sat long enough in the water floating, they would waterlog and some would sink. They were massive. They were 4 and 5 feet across and sometimes 40 feet long, and they couldn't get it up. And they would sit there for the next 100 years. They would sometimes dredge down there and pull one up. I think 1 in 50 has this type of rot in it that causes it to have these grooves. And from what I understand at the time, it was the most valuable wood in the world because it was so rare. Great cypress from old trees was rare enough, but Pecky cypress was more rare still. I think the only places you could really see it on the Perry Mason set, his office was done in Pecky cypress, so you didn't see much of it. I feel like this house constantly refed and rebuilt Johnny in his dark times. I mean, he installed his parents over here for a very good reason, so that they would only be 50 yards away from him. And from what I understand, he came up here most mornings he was in town to have coffee with his mother and dad. So he had the most hectic, turbulent life we can imagine, but he came here to get his morning coffee, you know, to just kind of be regrounded.
When my grandmother was passing away, she died of lung cancer, but she never smoked, never did. My dad called me and he said, come on, the hospice says that it won't be long. And I raced over here and I walked in the door and they led me to the bed.
My mother's hospital bed stood right here. And we gathered around her bed and we're singing that last hour, last 2 or 3 hours we sang. And we just all stepped back. Johnny told me later that he saw angels come down and go under the bed and take Mama home.
My uncle said, come here, let me talk to you. And we went outside, we lit a cigarette. He said, you know, I got some advice for you if you'll take it. I said, yes, sir, I'll listen. He said, number one, Mark, if you always sing from the heart, people will remember you, they'll love you, and you can love them back. He said, if it comes from here, if it's a job, if you're just doing it for the money, get out of it. But I said, it's tough being in this business and being your nephew. I just want you to know that. His response was, you want to try to be Johnny Cash? I said, no, sir, I do not. So I went home and started working on a song called Uncle Johnny. I said, sometimes I think folks like me just because of who you are. Do you know how hard it is to be the nephew to a superstar? The evening air, it cut right through us as he turned to me and asked, have you ever once considered how hard it is to be Johnny Cash?
We could tell the days before her passing that it was close. And she would say, sing, sing. And we sang many songs. Johnny would lead and we'd, will there be any stars in my crown? And we won't have to cross Jordan alone. And then the last song we sang was, O Come Angel Band, which is exactly what happened.
She seemed to have such a pure heart. She never had said cuss words, never passed her lips. Negative talk never passed her lips. Gossip. But it was just her. It was, you just knew everything was good.
I loved coming here to this house, to my grandmother's house every Sunday for dinner, and the whole family would be here.
I have so many wonderful memories of this house because when you can't go anywhere else, you can come to Mama's.
I can almost smell her food. I can see her in the kitchen, just putting out this huge spread. And you know what? She kept the family together talking. She kept us here on Sunday. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have seen each other very, very much at all.
And she said to all of us many times, when I'm gone, I know you're going to lose touch with each other because this is the house that brings you all together as a family. Please don't let that happen. She would beg us, please don't let that happen. And for us to be able to have this house again and for us to come together, it's almost like her wish came true.
But it all centered around this house on Caudill Drive in Hendersonville, Tennessee.
Oh, come, angel band, come and around me stand. Oh, bear me away on your snow white wings to my immortal